Hey friends, welcome to a new video with anonymous scary stories. Today you'll hear some chilling tales that will send shivers down your spine. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoy this kind of content, and subscribe to the channel, it really helps a lot. And let me know in the comments which story creeped you out the most, or maybe you've experienced something similar yourself. The Nephilim cult kidnappings from 2001 are way weirder than you know. Some of you may recall the infamous Nephilim cult kidnappings from the beginning of the century, but for those who don't, a brief recap of the official narrative. In 2001, a series of disappearances perplexed investigators throughout the Midwest. The first to gain national attention, a 20-year-old student at Grand Valley State University named Kat Gregis went missing in late August. Her story gripped the American imagination for the usual reasons. Pretty, smart, young, white, and of course the circumstances of her disappearance were maddeningly bizarre. It happened sometime between midnight and 1 in the morning on Saturday the 18th. She'd been drinking with friends in the student townhouses just off campus, by all accounts having a good time, not particularly wasted. She left about an hour before her roommate, who traveled the same route home and saw no trace of her at that time. When said roommate awoke to find Kat absent that morning, panic set in. She began calling all their friends to see if they'd seen her, but the last anyone saw of Kat was at the party the previous night. Retracing her steps, the roommate discovered Kat's party outfit neatly folded and placed in the center of the footbridge that spanned a forest gorge. The initial presumption was that Kat jumped, something a few other students in previous years had done. The bridge's height, over 60 feet, is a lethal drop. Why she might have stripped naked before taking her own life was uncertain, and a question shortly abandoned after search parties failed to uncover a body in the ravine. Then, 2 weeks after her disappearance, a pair of student documentarians shooting a piece on the Gregis case uncovered peculiar tree trunk carvings in the ravine under the footbridge. They featured what have been described as hieroglyphs depicting some sort of ritual sacrifice to a giant deity. Local papers picked up the story, which quickly gained national attention. Met with heavy skepticism, the young documentarians were swiftly scorned by authorities for their disrespectful stunt, until Thomas Peterson. Much like Gregis, Peterson disappeared at night without a trace, until his wife discovered his neatly folded clothing placed on a forest path in the woods near their home. The ensuing search effort uncovered identical hieroglyphs to the Gregis case. Peterson lived in Big Bear Lake, California, 2,000 miles away from Grand Valley. Then there was Regina Altmaier from Reno, Nevada, Michael Insman from Little Rock, Arkansas, Hector Garcia in Flagstaff, Arizona. Different backgrounds, ages, finances, all vanished in the middle of the night, with their clothes discovered neatly folded on a trail several hours later, nearby trees bearing the curious symbols carved into their wood. Speculation ran rampant. So-called experts crawled out of the woodwork to cash in, as talking heads hawking books about cult conspiracies and underground extremist networks. I haven't been able to identify the individual who introduced the name, but from this farrago of commentary arose the moniker Nephilim cult. It came from an interpretation of the carvings, a group of cultists in worship of their Nephilim god. By the end of July, a total of 18 disappearances had been attributed to the Nephilim cult, including my sister Luna. Just as the others before her, she vanished in the dead of night. Her folded clothes were found on a wooded footpath, and nearby trees bore the Nephilim carvings. Here's what you don't know. Every missing person in the Nephilim cult kidnappings left behind cryptic journals of one form or another. Luna had a diary, others scrawled notes on napkins, receipts, others floppy disks with text files. Their contents were mostly gibberish, and every decoder the FBI employed failed to make heads or tails of the symbols. However, every one of them, without exception, featured somewhere the phrase, "It is coming." 24 years' time, wash clean the world of filth that follows. Verbatim, word for word exactly that in every document. Nobody knew what that meant, but the families of victims were shaken by the discovery. None of us knew of the documents prior to the investigation, nor did any of us witness strange behavior exhibited by our loved ones. Luna had just started college, was the first member of our family to do so, and was ecstatic about her life prospects. Neither myself nor our parents had ever seen Luna writing in that diary, which was found stashed beneath her bed 2 days after she went missing. My sister was the last person to vanish. It was July 30th, 2001. The investigation ceased abruptly 6 weeks later. The towers fell, and the nation found a new bogeyman. The special task force assembled for the Nephilim cult disbanded. The federal agents it comprised reallocated to various anti-terror initiatives. Years passed. The families kept in contact, conducting our own investigation, such as it was. We surveilled the crime scenes to see if Nephilim cultists might return, but only ever encountered teens or other freaks out looking for a spooky thrill. We hired our own Piris and cryptographers, and the desperate among us turned to various New Age grifters for answers. None were supplied. In 2008, the widow of Hector Garcia received a letter promising the return of her beloved in exchange for her faith. Many in our network of bereaved families latched onto this, despite the claims of the skeptical few, insisting it was nothing more than a scheme. Nevertheless, we asked old FBI contacts to review the letter, who performed a cursory examination and no further investigation. The letter offered no instructions on how Isabel might demonstrate her faith, or in whom or what she was to invest her faith in, so we all anticipated follow-up communications. None came. Hope dwindled. Some in our network passed away, others withdrew. Our number shrank to a handful of stalwarts still hunting for answers. In the fall of 2015, the nightmares began. Visitations of the missing haunted our dreams, but never of our own relations. I dreamt of Regina Altmaier. Isabel Garcia dreamt of my sister Luna. They came to us deformed as if stretched, their grotesquely gangling bodies shambling out from the trees, hoarse voices repeating the cryptic phrase they'd each written down prior to their disappearances. Only the countdown amended. It is coming, 10 years' time. Wash clean the world of filth that follows. A warning? Directions? It felt simultaneously prophetic and instructional. Night after night, the same dream, and it went on for weeks. None of us knew what it meant, but there were plenty of wild theories. Conspiracies about mind control, radio frequencies that broadcast messages from the Nephilim cult directly into our brains. It's the same tech they tested out in Havana. They hijacked 5G towers to reach us. It's a plea for help. They're angels now, warning us about encroaching end times. I didn't think any of these theories held water, but I had none of my own to offer. Like everything else, however, the nightmares fizzled out. The next development happened in 2020, when 3 bodies showed up: Patricia Reeves, Matt Templeton, and Zosia Dreyfus. Amidst the pandemic, the many bodies sent for burial on Hart Island in New York contained among them the remains of 3 missing Nephilim cult victims. Patricia, Matt, and Zosia were discovered in the freezers, each body preserved perfectly from the date of their disappearance. Despite nearly 2 decades passing, they looked the very same as they had in 2001. None of them had any remaining family, but instructions had been given to relay any discoveries related to them to members of our network, which was how we found out. We otherwise would never have known, given what authorities did next. The resurfaced trio were buried quietly on Hart Island, while feds scoured hospitals for clues. None arose, nor any additional bodies. The FBI suppressed the story and asked us not to go to news outlets. It would only complicate our investigation. We foolishly believed them, but after no immediate leads presented themselves, they gave up the hunt. That was 5 years ago. Over the ensuing half-decade, I've seen members of our group splinter away, coalescing around absurd theories, some going so far as to suggest the government is responsible and calling for violent action against politicians, federal agents. This all started when I was a teen in 2001, fearing for my sister's life, fearing where she might have gone, wishing she would come back. Now I find myself wondering where she went to, if I might be able to join her. The clock is almost up. 24 years dwindled to nothing. What will happen? Will it come to wash clean the world of the filth that follows? I work the night shift at a gas station 15 miles from the nearest town, but people keep asking me about the town just down the road. I work at Bill Grady's all-night gas and shop off the Irrawan County Loop Road, for those unfamiliar with America's most isolated county. Irrawan is a large-ish island more than 100 miles out to sea from Baltimore. The Loop Road makes a circle around the island and connects most of the major towns. The station is located about halfway between Mudsark and Jerusalem. If you know the area, then you know how isolated it is, which is why I took the job. I always fancied trying my hand at writing a novel and working way out there with no civilization larger than a trailer park or a farmhouse for 15 miles in either direction. And well, long story short, that struck me as a good way to make some money while having free time to tackle this project. Despite that, I assure you this isn't fiction. I wish I was creative enough to make something this strange up. First things first, my name is David. It's not, but I'd rather stay anonymous, and I've only had this job for about 2 weeks. The last guy to hold the job was a kid who helped train me for 2 days, then shipped out. He was joining the Air Force, and I was hired really quickly to fill the vacuum he would be leaving. To my understanding, he kinda sprung it on the owner out of the blue. Anyway, he seemed kinda nervous those 2 nights, but I chalked it up to his being about to leave for basic training and thought nothing of it. I had been there myself 1 week exactly, and had already fallen into a rhythm. The night shift only had a handful of customers, and I spent most of my time writing or smoking, at a safe distance from the pumps obviously. When this trucker came in, probably early 20s, pale-skinned and dressed in jeans and a flannel shirt with its sleeves rolled up, and a pack of cigarettes in one of the cuffs, the way you see in old war movies, if you need a visual aid. He looked around for a few minutes before walking up to the counter with a bottle of Coke and a pack of pork rinds. He stood looking over my shoulder at the rack of cigarettes and vapes behind me, checking for his brand, I assume, then asked for a pack of Lucky Strike 100S. He had this odd, kinda cold-sounding voice. That's not a good description, but it's the best I've got. It wasn't an accent really, just a cadence and tone that made me wonder if he was on something. I didn't care either way and rang him up. He paid cash, and then he asked me a question. Do you know if Kelly's Diner is open this late? I had never heard of such a place, and told him. He gave me a confused look before shrugging and walking out of the shop. If that had been the last of it, I'd have forgotten, but ever since I've been hearing more and more weird remarks about a town that I know doesn't exist. The second event came a day later, when an old guy in a suit pulled up outside in an antique black car that I guessed to be from sometime around World War II. Give or take probably 10 years on either side. I'm not really into cars, and he was wearing a suit to match. It was black and formal like you'd wear to a funeral, and matched some old suits my granddad used to wear. He was visibly confused, and I wondered if he was senile, which seemed confirmed when he opened his mouth. He had this odd old-timey way of talking, and it stuck with me. He said, "Now I feel a right fool asking you, boy, but how do I get to Winewater Springs from here? I've gone and gotten my fool self lost, it seems." I'd never heard of the place, so I asked him some questions trying to get a handle on where it could be, or what it even was, as I wasn't sure if it was a town or a natural feature with that name. He told me it was a town, located along this stretch of highway between Mudsark and Jerusalem. He swore he must have missed the turnoff in the fog, but couldn't orient himself. I told him kindly that there was no such town, and asked if there was anyone I could call for him. But he just looked at me with a really odd expression before walking back out into the misty night air. I should have done something probably. But what? Call the sheriff's office and report an old guy said something strange. Nah, dude, not me. By the third time I was almost expecting it. This lady with big poofy hair came in wearing a bright pink jacket over fairly mundane clothes. She smiled widely, and in a voice I can only describe as ditzy, asked me how far she had to drive before coming to the turnoff for Winewater Springs. At this point, I was starting to suspect a prank. I had lived on the island for my entire life and knew exactly how many towns there were in the county. I knew all their names, and I knew someone from pretty much all of them. Like I said, Array said Array small place, and I knew for an abso gold-plated freaking lootly certain fact that there was no such town. So I decided to play along with whatever prank or hazing ritual this was. I asked her the same sort of describe where it is questions I had asked the old man, and she was a little clearer than him in her answers. The conversation went like this. Do you know how far the turnoff is from Jerusalem? Like 20 miles. To be clear, that would place this town about 2 or 3 miles north of the gas station, in the middle of what I knew to be a cornfield. Is there a sign? Yeah, I mean, there's that green sign next to the highway, and a wooden one closer to town. How big is the town? Like I dunno about the size of Whisper Bay? For those unaware, that's the next town south of Jerusalem, with about 2,000 people in it. When was the last time you went there? This morning. Duh. I live there. The questioning continued like this for a few minutes but didn't lead anywhere productive. I had neither been able to figure out where she was looking for or get her to break character in whatever joke this was. So finally I told her I couldn't help her, and she left in a sulk. Just to prove I wasn't going crazy, I drove the entire length of the road between work and Mudsark the next day, slowly and going both directions looking for anything that might say Winewater Springs. Nothing, nada, zilch, not even the hint of a sign or road ever having been there, let alone existing today. The next night nobody came in, asking about anything weird. Well, there was a weird dude, a priest with the robe and white collar wearing sunglasses inside, at night when it was overcast. But that guy is only memorable because he had a bad vibe, so to speak. Nothing he said was weird. So I thought maybe the joke or whatever it was over. But the night after that, 2 people asked for help finding things I'd never heard of. One gave me the name of a hotel that I didn't know, and when asked said it was in Winewater Springs. I gave them directions to Gilman's bed and breakfast in Jerusalem instead, saying I hadn't heard of what they were looking for. They thanked me and left. Then not 20 minutes later, another guy walked in dressed wildly inappropriately for this time of year, wearing shorts and a t-shirt when it was cold and rainy. Like always around here outside. He looked behind me at the rack of smokes and squinting, asked if we sold Diamond and Callaway brand cigarettes. I had never heard of that brand in my life, but just told him we didn't sell them. He shrugged and left. But I swear he muttered something about knowing the gas station in Winewater Springs had them as he left. I've also noticed that the radio in my car seems to get odd static sometimes around where the supposed turnoff should be. I'm sure it's just a coincidence, but it's all adding up to leave me really confused. There's a lot of creepy stuff on this island. We're cold, foggy, and isolated, and that breeds superstition and folklore. Ghost stories and cryptids are probably thicker on the ground here than anywhere else in the country. But I've asked around among my friends and nobody has ever heard a legend about a missing town or anything else that could explain this. If it's real, why can't I find the turnoff? And if, as I suspected, this is a prank, what's the punchline? Does anyone have any idea what I'm dealing with? It's starting to drive me crazy, and I know, this being the internet, people will mock me. Good. If there is a simple logical explanation for this that will make me feel stupid with how plain it was, I'll be happy. That's what I want. A nice little tied up with a bow answer that makes me feel like an absolute idiot. My wife brought home a stray cat while I was away. Now I don't recognize her, and I hear it talking back. I returned to my home after an arduous work trip that lasted for 3 full weeks. My heart ached with longing, a longing that permeated every cell of my being, an overwhelming yearning for my wife, for her laughter that brightens my days, and for the warmth of our home that my soul had grown accustomed to. I turned the key in the door lock. The metal was cold under my fingertips, which trembled slightly from sheer anticipation. I pushed the door open gently, and I was greeted in the hallway by a strange scent, not at all familiar to me, a complex mixture of something faintly earthy, like the aroma of damp soil after a light rain, and a sweet feminine perfume I didn't recognize as one of my wife's usual fragrances. My heart constricted a little, but I attributed it to her perhaps trying a new air freshener or incense. I called out my wife's name, the name I love, and her voice came from the living room, carrying a quiet tone, perhaps quieter than necessary. Moments later, she appeared, a faint smile gracing her face, a smile that couldn't quite reach the sparkle in her eyes, which had dimmed a little. I embraced her tightly, trying to draw some reassurance from her closeness, but I felt a strange coldness in her body, or perhaps it was just my own exhaustion after the weariness of the long journey and the hardship of the road. "I missed you so much," I whispered in her ear, burying my face in her hair, from which that new scent emanated. She replied in a faint voice, barely audible, "Me too, I missed you." There was a certain coolness in her voice, something I had never known from her. Then, from behind her legs, where she stood as if shielding something, an orange-colored creature emerged, with thick, elegant fur. It was a medium-sized cat, lithe in build, but what truly froze the blood in my veins and made my breath catch was the look in its eyes. They were wide, a radiant amber color, clear as if they were polished gemstones, staring at me with an unsettling steadiness, with a strange confidence, completely devoid of any familiar feline expression, like gentleness or childish curiosity. I felt the power of those gazes, as if they were piercing through the layers of my skin, bypassing my bones, to reach the depths of my soul, exploring its secrets and hidden corners without permission, shamelessly. An unwarranted cold shiver ran through me, like a light electric current. "What is this beautiful creature?" I asked, trying hard to hide the unease that was beginning to creep into my voice. My wife smiled a slightly wider smile this time, but it still carried that pale shadow. She bent down gracefully and said in a voice that seemed to carry some pride, "Oh, this is Ginger. Isn't he lovely? I found him on the doorstep about 2 weeks ago, on a stormy night. He looked so lonely and miserable, shivering from cold and hunger, so my heart wouldn't let me leave him. I took him in." She bent further and stroked his head gently. The cat raised its long, bushy tail like an orange flag and began to purr deeply, not like the ordinary purr of cats that resembles the cooing of doves, but deeper and more resonant, not without its own strangeness, as if it came from a chest much larger than a cat's. At first, I tried not to pay much attention to it. I told myself, over and over, that she must have felt a crushing loneliness during my long absence, and that having a pet in the house might be a comfort to her, a silent companion to fill some of the void I had left. The first few days after my return were somewhat normal, or so I tried to convince myself. We resumed our daily routine, although I noticed with a worried eye that my wife was spending significantly more time with Ginger than was usual with any pet we had previously owned. The cat followed her around the house like her shadow, never leaving her side, sitting at her feet in majestic silence as she cooked in the kitchen, its amber eyes fixed on her every move. At night, it slept at the foot of our bed, curled up like an orange ball, its eyes rarely leaving her sleeping face, as if guarding her from something. But slowly, very slowly, like the crawl of a snake, I began to notice more profound and more alarming changes in my beloved wife's behavior. The vibrant spark that used to radiate from her usual conversation had extinguished, and her resonant laughter, which used to fill the corners of the house with joy and life, had quieted. She became absent-minded much of the time, sitting before me as a body without a soul, as if she were listening intently to something no one else could hear, something echoing in distant spaces. She no longer shared meals with me at the table, as we had for years, those precious moments when we would exchange stories about our day. Instead, she increasingly preferred to take her plate and retreat to the living room, with Ginger gracefully winding around her feet or settling possessively in her lap, eating small pieces of her food that she would toss to him from time to time, ignoring my bewildered and questioning glances. "Is everything all right, my love?" I asked her one evening, my heart heavy with her oppressive silence, which had become like a wall isolating her from me. I could see sadness etched on her features, but it was a strange sadness, mixed with a kind of resignation. She slowly lifted her eyes from the cat, which was licking its small pink tongue over its orange paw, and looked at me with a blank gaze for a few moments, a gaze that passed through me as if I were an invisible ghost. Then she said in a voice devoid of any expression, "Yes, everything is fine. Why do you keep asking such questions?" I answered her with a pang, "Because you seem different, sad. Did something upset you? Is it because of my long absence? Please, talk to me." She shook her head, "No," with a slow, heavy movement, and returned her gaze to Ginger, as if looking at him provided a solace she couldn't find in anything else. "No, there's nothing to worry about. I'm just a little tired these days." But I wasn't convinced by her words. There was something deeper, something that went beyond mere fatigue. That cat, Ginger, had an overwhelming presence in the house, a presence that surpassed its small size. Whenever I looked at it, I felt that piercing gaze penetrating me, as if it were reading my thoughts, analyzing my motives, and judging me with a harsh silence. Its meow was not ordinary at all. Sometimes it would emit deep, mysterious hums, and at other times strange, sharp, and broken sounds, unlike any cat meow I knew, more like a private language of its own, a language understood only by it and my wife. One night, I woke up in the dead of night to the sound of a faint whisper, a soft feminine voice seeping from the living room. I got out of bed cautiously, my heart beginning to pound with increasing anxiety. I tiptoed, following the source of the sound, until I reached the partially closed living room door. Through the narrow opening, I saw my wife sitting on the sofa in the darkness, barely illuminated by the threads of moonlight filtering through the window. Ginger was nestled in her lap, like a small orange statue. She was talking to it in a low, intimate voice, with words I couldn't initially distinguish. I moved closer, until my nose almost touched the wood of the door, held my breath, and focused all my senses. Finally, I managed to catch some scattered phrases from her strange conversation. "Yes, my dear, I understand you perfectly. I know what you want and what you yearn for. It will be as you wish. Don't worry, I will never let you down." She was talking to it as if she were answering questions posed by the cat, as if she were receiving orders or instructions from it. I froze in place, and I felt a cold horror creep into my heart, pumping ice into my veins. Who was she talking to? Was she delirious in her sleep while sitting up? Or was the cat? No, this was impossible. Utter madness. The next day, I tried hard to broach the subject with her very cautiously, fearing I might explode at her or increase her isolation. "My love," I said as we were having breakfast. Or rather, I was having breakfast while she stared blankly at her cold cup of coffee. "I heard you talking last night in the living room. Were you dreaming?" She looked at me with sudden sharpness and said in a defensive tone, "Talking? Who do you think I was talking to?" "To Ginger," I said hesitantly, trying to make my voice sound normal and non-accusatory. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and a faint, sarcastic smile played on her lips. "And what's so strange about that? Don't many people talk to their pets? Weren't you doing that yourself with our old dog, Lucky?" "Yes, of course," I replied quickly, but it seemed different, more serious, as if you were having a real conversation, not just cooing at a pet. She was silent for a few moments, fiddling with a small spoon in her cup. Then she said in a voice closer to a whisper, a voice that seemed to carry a heavy secret, "Sometimes, I feel like its meow isn't just a meow. I feel like its hums carry words, as if it's whispering things to me that no one else understands." Then she shook her head quickly, violently, as if to dispel a disturbing thought that had crept into her mind, and said in a tone she tried to make casual, "Don't mind what I say, maybe I'm just imagining things due to lack of sleep," but I couldn't not care. How could I ignore such a disturbing admission? The strangeness of the relationship between her and that cat worsened gradually and alarmingly, like a malignant disease spreading through the body of our relationship. She no longer cared about her appearance as she used to. She who was the epitome of elegance and grace. She neglected her household duties, which she used to take pride in perfecting and loving, and dust began to accumulate in the corners. And the houseplants she used to care for with love had started to wither. Her eyes now held a hollow, dead look, even when she spoke to me on rare occasions. And on the few times she did sit with me, perhaps in an attempt to appease me or dispel my suspicions, she would suddenly furrow her brow and turn involuntarily towards the cat, which would usually be lurking in some corner of the room, watching us silently, with its piercing amber eyes. She would say in a confused voice things like, "What? Now but. I can't at this moment." Then she would abruptly fall silent and look at me with embarrassment, as if she had caught herself, or as if she had divulged a secret she shouldn't have. The strange smell in the house grew stronger day by day, that damp, earthy smell, which increasingly resembled the scent of freshly opened graves, now mixed with something sickeningly sweet, viscous, that clung to the nose and throat. I tried repeatedly to open the windows for ventilation, to dispel this suffocating miasma, but my wife would rush to close them immediately, with nervous movements, claiming that Ginger felt the cold easily, and that the outside air might disturb him. It all came to a head, the final straw, one bleak evening. I had returned from work exhausted, carrying the world's worries on my shoulders. All I wished for was some peace and quiet. I entered the house to find her sitting on the floor in the living room, in a strange posture, with Ginger perched in her lap like a small king on his throne. She was feeding it pieces of raw, blood-red meat from her plate, dripping blood and whispering incomprehensible words to it, a private language between them. She would laugh from time to time, quiet, chilling laughs, laughs that had no joy in them, but were closer to the muffled cackles of someone who had lost their mind. I could no longer bear this surreal, gripping scene. I approached her and said in a voice I tried hard to make firm and strong, despite the terror that was wringing my heart, "Enough. This is enough. Woman, look at yourself. Look at what you've become. This cat, it's affecting you very badly. It's destroying you, and destroying our lives." She raised her head very slowly, as if she carried the weight of the world on her neck, and looked at me with eyes completely devoid of any human emotion, eyes like windows to an abyss. I felt in that moment that I was looking at a stranger, at a creature I didn't know, a creature that had taken over my wife's body. "What do you mean by that?" she asked in a voice as cold as ice, a voice as sharp as a razor. "I mean Ginger, that little devil," I shouted, my patience exhausted. "Ever since that damned cat entered our house, you've been changing for the worse day by day. You don't eat with me, you don't talk to me like before, you neglect yourself, and you neglect our home, which used to be a paradise. It's not normal. This is not just a cat." I took a deep breath, trying to gather my courage, and said with finality, "This cat has to go. I'll take it myself to an animal shelter tomorrow morning, whether you agree or not." In that instant, as if my words were the key that unleashed a caged beast, her demeanor transformed before me horrifically. She sprang to her feet with a swift movement, and Ginger fell from her lap quietly, like a piece of silk, but its amber eyes were fixed on me with terrifying concentration, with the focus of a hunter watching its prey. My wife's eyes gleamed with a frightening animalistic glint, and her facial features hardened into a mask of pure rage, a rage I had never seen on a human face in my life. "Don't you dare," she screamed in a hoarse voice, a strange voice, not the gentle voice I knew and loved. "Don't you dare touch Ginger. Don't you even think about it. But he's making you sick. He's poison," I cried out in desperation, trying to reach any remnant of sanity in her head. "Can't you see that? You're not well. You need help." She suddenly lunged, with a movement I hadn't expected from her, towards the kitchen. For a moment, it crossed my mind that she might be getting a glass of water to calm down, or perhaps she would break down crying. But instead, I heard the sound of sharp metal scraping, the sound of a knife being violently pulled from the kitchen drawer. The blood froze in my veins, and I felt the ground sway beneath me. She returned holding a paring knife, its blade gleaming, waving it in my face with nervous, unsteady movements, as if she couldn't control her hand. "If you try to take him from me," she said, panting, her eyes blazing like burning coals, I swear by his pure soul that I will hurt you. I won't let you. He's all I have." The horror that engulfed me in that moment cannot be described in words. This was no longer the wife I knew and loved. This creature standing before me, trembling with rage, threatening me with a knife, was something else, something dark and terrifying, something that had possessed her. I backed away slowly, step by step, raising my hands in a clear gesture of surrender, trying not to provoke her anger further. All right, my love," I said in a trembling voice, trying to calm her down. "Calm down, please. I won't do anything. I won't touch him. Just put the knife down." But she didn't calm down. She continued to stare at me with that crazed look, the knife in her hand trembling dangerously. I realized in that moment that I was in real danger, that my life was on the line. I seized a fleeting moment of distraction in her eyes when she glanced for a second towards the cat, which was sitting perfectly still, watching the scene, and I pushed her with all my might to the side. She stumbled, losing her balance for a moment, and that was my chance. I ran as fast as I could towards the bathroom, slammed the door behind me, and locked it just in time. I heard her furious, hate-filled scream, then the heavy thud of her body against the door, trying to force it open. My heart was pounding wildly in my chest, like a trapped bird trying to break the bars of its cage, and my breath came in ragged gasps, barely able to draw air into my lungs. My hands trembled as I desperately fumbled for my phone in my pocket. I finally found it, called the police, and explained the situation in a broken, stuttering voice, barely able to string words together from sheer terror. They said they would send a patrol car immediately, and that I should stay calm and not open the door for any reason. And while I waited, leaning against the cold door, listening to her panting, angry breaths from the other side, I heard her begin to speak. She wasn't talking to me, nor was she screaming or threatening. Her voice had returned to that whispering, intimate tone I had heard her use when talking to the cat in the dead of night. "Don't worry, my love, my precious Ginger. I won't let him hurt you or take you away from me. We'll be fine, just you and me, together forever. She was talking to the cat, that orange demonic thing that had destroyed our lives. Then, for the first time in my life, I heard another voice answer her from behind the door. It wasn't a meow, nor was it a hum. It was a thin, high-pitched voice, sharp as a knife's edge, coiling like a snake in the air. A voice utterly inhuman, whispering words in a language I didn't understand, an ancient, dark language. But it filled me with a horror beyond any description, a pure primal terror. The cat was answering my wife. It was replying to her. I froze in place, and I felt an icy cold seep into my bones, paralyzing my limbs. This wasn't the worst of it. Oh, I wish it had been. For a few moments after that demonic dialogue between my wife and the cat, other footsteps reached my ears from behind the door. They weren't my wife's light steps, whose sound I knew so well. These were heavy, deliberate steps, very long strides, as if a giant creature with unnaturally long legs was walking slowly, prowling the hallway. Those steps walked alongside my wife's, and then both sets of footsteps stopped right in front of the bathroom door, where I cowered in fear. I couldn't take this nightmare anymore. I started screaming with all my might, pounding on the door with my fists, begging them to go away, to leave me alone. I don't know how much time passed while I was in this state, trapped in this cramped bathroom, listening to that demonic conversation unfolding outside, and to the thud of those heavy, terrifying footsteps pacing the hallway, approaching and retreating. Every cell in my body was screaming in terror, and every nerve in my being yearned for salvation. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of torment, I heard loud, violent knocks on the front door of the house. Then the sound of police officers announcing their presence, ordering the door to be opened. In that instant, my wife's whispering voice cut off, and those long footsteps vanished abruptly, as if they had evaporated into thin air. I heard a commotion outside, the sounds of shuffling feet, then my wife's sharp scream as she resisted violently. I waited a little longer, then opened the bathroom door very cautiously, my heart still pounding violently. The hallway was completely empty, except for some disarray left by my wife's struggle. I saw police officers leading her away. She was in a state of extreme agitation, screaming incomprehensible words, and looking around with wild, unfocused eyes, as if she didn't know where she was or what was happening. She said nothing about the cat. She didn't even look in my direction. They took her and said they would transfer her to a psychiatric facility for evaluation and treatment. When things had calmed down a bit, and I had regained some of my composure, I asked one of the officers, my voice still trembling, "And the cat, Ginger? Where is he? Did you find him?" The officer looked at me with obvious bewilderment and said calmly, "Cat? We didn't see any cat, sir. We've searched the entire house. There's no trace of any cat here." They didn't find him. Ginger had disappeared just as he had appeared, suddenly and without a trace, as if he had never existed, as if he were merely a figment of my sick imagination. My wife is now in a psychiatric facility. The doctors say she's suffering from an acute nervous breakdown and auditory and visual hallucinations. They blame me indirectly, saying I left her alone for too long, and that loneliness might have pushed her to the brink of madness. Maybe they're right in part. Maybe I unintentionally neglected her, but I know what I saw and what I heard. I know that this is bigger and deeper than just a nervous breakdown. I'm writing this now from our home, or what used to be our home. I live here alone, in this desolate silence. I'm desperately trying to get my life back, to piece myself together, but it seems impossible. Every night, when complete silence descends upon the house, and everything is shrouded in darkness, I wake up suddenly. I wake up to the sound of those footsteps. Long, heavy, terrifying footsteps, pacing slowly outside my bedroom door, in the dark hallway. Sometimes they stop right in front of the door, and I feel something standing there, in the darkness, watching me, waiting, breathing quietly, terrifyingly. The cat is missing. Yes, that's what the police say, but I am not alone in this house. I know it's here, that thing that was walking beside my wife, that thing that answered her whispers with a demonic voice, that thing that possesses those long strides. It's here with me. I don't know what to do. I'm afraid to sleep because I know I'll wake up to that sound, and I'm afraid to wake up because I know it's waiting for me. I fear this silence that precedes hearing those footsteps, and I fear the darkness that hides the unimaginable. Have I gone mad too? Has my wife's illness spread to me? Or is there something, some entity, that has crept into our lives through that orange cat with the piercing amber eyes? I have no answers. All I have is this unending terror and the echo of those long footsteps that haunt me in the dead of night, reminding me that I am not alone, and I never will be. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments which story you found the darkest, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you next time.